think the best place to start is kind of at the beginning, and I'd love to know what made you decide to go indie.
Well, I started out. I mean, when we did Mist, it was an indie game. It was there was only four of us really working on the project at the time. But then, that was sort of the dawn of really the kind of modern era of computer gaming, and so companies just generally were much smaller. Even EA was smaller. Activision was smaller. Everything was kind of tiny back in the early '90s, and back then there was a certain kind of dynamic that goes along with being with a small company. You have a lot more flexibility to make changes, to pivot on an idea. You can see what works quicker, and you don't have to go digging through all kinds of bureaucracy, or structure in order to make a change on something. So that appealed to me as far as when I started Eagre Games, was being able to have a small company that we can generate a number of games where we can be flexible with the ideas as we go along. Because one of the things I've learned through the years is that if you come up with a design at the beginning of a game and don't make any changes with it, chances are you're not going to have a great game. Things that are made on these games as you go along with these bigger companies tend to take a little bit longer to make a good change that's typically for the better of the game. With a small game like Eagre Games, we can do that very simply. I left the larger companies because, frankly, my last company was Vicarious Visions, and I was art group manager there. I managed some 35 artists along with another guy who had the other 35, and that was something that really took a lot of effort. I mean, there was no creativity involved other than trying to put people with the right project. That was about the most creativity I had in that role, and I really ended up missing the creative aspect of it. So when I left Vicarious, I kind of decided at that time I wanted to move someplace I really liked, so I came to Maine. And when I came here, I lived over on the coast for a year and moved to Bangor and started Eagre Games about 2.5 years ago. And, I really haven't looked back since. So, having a small company, finding people who are passionate about our games is great. And being with a small company gives me a lot more, as I said, flexibility you don't have with a larger company.
Sure, and you kind of led really nicely into kind of where I wanted to go next which was, obviously indie development has some benefits, like you said, the flexibility, the ability to change things, do things quicker with a smaller team. But I wanted to kind of know what you found as the challenges, specifically in regards to basing in Maine. And I know when you did your AMA the other day, one of the questions I saw was, Maine's not really known as a technological hotspot. And I thought it was a good point. I've heard that from some of the other devs in Maine I've talked to. So specifically in regards to that, what kind of hurdles have you found that you've had to overcome?
Well, when I first got out here, I was astounded by the sheer fact that almost all the major colleges have students that when they eventually graduate, very few of them actually stay in the state, especially if they're in a technical profession they choose. It's just there aren't a whole lot of jobs for them. And while on the technical side of that, in programming, computer sciences, Husson, University of Maine, these schools provide, some really outstanding students that come out into the field that typically leave the state. I've snagged one of them to basically work for us as a programmer, Calvin. I think you met Calvin briefly while you were at the Bull Moose event. But the biggest challenge I'm finding out here is there's a couple of things. One, internet. Internet in Maine is really bad for the most part if you're a company like us. Be it whether you're a video producer or you're dealing with photography and you have to upload a lot of big images. If you're not lucky enough to have some place with a really super fast broadband or fiber optic, it's a tedious process in getting things put up, online or transferring files. And that is a huge issue throughout the state. And I think in a lot of ways that gets in the way of any big technical industries moving here, at least in as far as if they're considering what they can do with broadband and their information, getting it up online. They're going to look in other places possibly, or they have to look at a very few locations within the state that have it. Otherwise, the other thing I found that's difficult is that there isn't a history of games in the state per se. I mean, it's growing, it's getting better. But within the art community, there aren't a whole lot of people doing a lot of digital art. Finding artists to do 3D graphics for the games has been a challenge. And in this type of industry, I come from an art background, and if I can't find people that can carry through a vision on a visual level, I have a hard time getting the games that I want, because our games are very visually focused. They're
Right.
very, for me, the idea of a good game involves good programming, good game design, and good visuals. If you're missing any one of those columns of support, you're not producing the best game you can produce.
Sure.
And so it's been a struggle finding artists. I have to admit, though, I've recently found a couple guys. One's down in Portland, and I've got a guy, James Corbin, up here in Bangor. He lives in Brewer, who's phenomenal. He's this young kid who's going to University of Southern New Hampshire, and his work is really, really good. But he's going to college out of state to learn all this.
Right.
In Portland now, I guess there's some schools starting to look at game design, game art, I've heard, and there's some good stuff being produced down there, but it's still slow in emerging as, for having any people I can hire. So that's a big challenge.
That's kind of funny too when you think about it, because Maine kind of has a really vibrant art culture. Portland, Bangor, all along the coast, there's a history of artists coming to do, kind of traditional art.
Right.
But digital just hasn't really caught up.
Yeah, I think people have been drawn to the photography in the area. I mean, it's a beautiful place to be a photographer, with all the natural beauty of the state itself, and a lot of people are drawn to that. Maine Media Workshops in Rockport, they teach, I teach some classes there on computer graphics, and I have a gaming course going on there this summer for a couple of weeks to high school kids. So that's a couple of few places where people can go to start learning some of this stuff. But you're right, everybody is drawn here more for the watercolors, for the painting, for the photography, because it really is a beautiful state. But there just isn't a history of the digital end of it. I guess probably because people haven't really seen a need for it yet in the state. And, we're among one of the few game companies in the state who require that level of talent to produce our games. So I think, we're talking to a lot of people. I think it's slowly changing, but it's going to take a while.
So kind of moving on to that, let's talk a little bit about your company, Eagre Games. And as I mentioned in our Kickstarter watch on Zed, the thing that stood out most to me when I met you and started talking about, your history and what your kind of modus operandi was your commitment to making nonviolent adventure games. Really stuck out to me. It's kind of almost like an additional hurdle. I mean, you're an indie studio in a state that has some challenges, and you're limiting yourself in some ways narratively. I mean, the idea of violence as a narrative device is something that a lot of people use. I would say it gets overused in the games industry. It's very easy to get people invested in a story if there's that element of danger, element of violence.
Right.
I think it's remarkable that you guys are making that stance, just for the sake of indies representing variety, giving people that option. If they don't want to experience a story of that type, they can turn to other places. And I think the indie community is pretty good at providing that option. But I wanted to know where that decision came from for you personally. What made you kind of take that stand?
Well, as a game player, I play a wide variety of games. I mean, I play first-person shooters. I play games that involve a lot of violence, and I find them to be exhilarating and fun. But there's also that part of me that has this sort of desire to kind of slow down things a bit, and nonviolence in the games doesn't necessarily mean there's a lack of conflict that occurs. It just means that you're not acting out in a violent manner, where you're killing things or being pressured to keep, to stay alive or anything like that. Our games don't involve that. But the story, the narrative does involve conflict. Conflict is what drives a good story. And that conflict could be personal, it could be interpersonal, it could be, any number of things that come up that cause you to stop and pause for a second and question things, or you don't want to face certain things. I mean, these conflicts come up inside of us every day, and I think that's the part of the story that I want to tell with Zed. And from the nonviolent aspect of it, if you're a parent and your kids nowadays are going to be, their heads are buried in their pads, iPads, or their Android devices, their mobile phones, computers, whatever. I mean, parents have a hard time deciding what's going to be good for their kid or what's not going to be good. I just want people that when they play Zed to know that, your kid's not going to be exposed to anything that's really, I guess, if kids decide to play it. I think this is still more adult oriented in some ways, but you don't have to worry about the content necessarily going against what it is that you wish your kids would be playing if you allow your kids to play that. And also from a standpoint of people who play games, a lot of people who played Myst, for instance, never played a game before. Not to say there were a whole lot of games to play back then, but but it was a new time. And the thing that was amazing about Myst, and it was a non-violent game. It was a conflict between these two brothers, in essence, and a father. And I think the fact that many people who played the game tended to be outside of the typical game industry or the game playing public, like grandfathers and grandmothers playing with their kids, and almost I talk to people every day when I mention I worked on Myst. Oh, I played that with my dad.
Yeah.
I played it with my mom, or my grandfather played this with me, or a grandmother. It really transcended all these different I guess these different markets in the demographics and in the range of people that it appealed to. And I think a big part of that was the fact that it was nonviolent. It was something which you can get into and immerse yourself with and share that, sitting behind the screen with somebody else, and you can kind of just sort of explore. And again, on the exploration end of it, I think one of the things I like about games like what we're doing is that every place I've ever lived at, typically where I've moved, and I moved a lot in the game industry at various companies I've worked with, within 6 months of wherever I moved, be it Salt Lake City or Las Vegas, Nevada, or Spokane, Washington, I knew more about that area because I explored that area more than 90% of the locals did.
Mm.
It's like I always had this desire to go out and explore things. Games like Myst and Zed, and I mean, even to some degree, things like like Assassin's Creed or whatever, they give you that opportunity to explore the environment, to go and see what's around that corner. That to me also has a lot of value. And having a story that drives that exploration, like what we're doing with Zed, makes it even more valuable. So as far as just the nonviolence, I think that you can tell a story in a nonviolent way that's interesting, that's compelling. It can be edgy, and it could have you questioning things, or just we can help you find reasons for why a person is feeling a certain way within the story. And I don't know, I find that very interesting personally, from the standpoint of as a designer and a producer of the game.
Yeah, so leading right into Zed. So I mean, I'm not going to touch too much on the details. People can go to the Kickstarter. There'll be a link below.
Thank you.
To find out kind of the details, but I wanted to touch on, so Zed is a dreamscape game. I mean, it's all about dreams. It's all about this dreamer and kind of exploring his dream worlds. And you mentioned that a lot of these dreams are pulled from your own experience, and that's gotta feel different than other games you've worked on, I imagine, to put something so personal, so rooted in your own mind into the game world. What does that feel like to see the dreams that you've had made real in a digital form?
Well, it comes back to the original reason I got into games originally, which was to be able to create some sort of a world that other people can explore, something that's generated from you. And as an artist, as a writer, people pull from themselves initially in order to help create. I mean, you can write about what you don't know if you study about it, but you can really write and design about what you do know if you're pulling it from something you're familiar with, be it where you've lived, be it whatever. Dreams are no different. I mean, dreams are something that I dream very vividly, and a lot of things in the game, while they're not directly related to some of my dreams, a lot of them, there are elements within the dreams that in the levels that are directly related to the dreams. And everybody has a way to express how they see the world around them in a dream. I mean, everybody dreams, as far as I know. So, as far as what it feels like, I mean, it's great. It's a good resource for me to pull from, and it's something that is a challenge because I want it to reflect an honest representation of what I have had in my dreams in the past. I just had a dream the other night that there was an image in there that sticks out of my mind amazingly. Very, very vividly, and it's like, how can I get that into the game? Because it really was something that was pretty interesting. So one of the cool things about that is, as I'm designing it, I can figure out ways to kind of incorporate some of these elements in there, because dreams are very unpredictable. You can be walking through one area, and then the next second, you know, you're going through something else. It just changes on a dime, and that's one of the cool things about this game. We can change things quickly.
Yeah, I mean, even from just the little bits that I experienced at the Kickstarter launch, I mean, the tones of the different levels you showed off was so different. I mean, it's going to be cool to experience and see how that all weaves together narratively. I mean, really, you were just kind of showing off snippets,
Right.
but I'm interested to know how that all relates to the narrative and kind of what's the goal or what's the message you're hoping to impart with that. I mean, obviously, you don't want to give away spoilers. I understand that, but what's that underlying tone or that message you're trying to convey?
I guess the underlying message, I mean, the story of Zed essentially is about this dreamer who he wants to finish this one last project for, you know, before he's dying. And he wants to finish this one last gift that he wants to give to his granddaughter and before he dies. And in order to do that, it's very, very difficult for him because he's suffering from, you know, either Alzheimer's or dementia. You know, he can't remember things. His mind has lost track of the ideas and the things that he wanted to do as this final gift. And one of the things I think that I want to leave with people is that no matter how dire things go, you can eventually, at some point, hopefully reconnect with all that stuff. I mean, that's the hope, is that, you know, if you've got something that you've left undone, is there a way to kind of reconnect with that, to find it, to be able to finish it before, you know, it's too late. And as a player, that's part of your job, is to be able to help him finish that one thing before he dies. And while we're not putting a time limit on a game, you know, there is a bit of a hurry because he's deteriorating rapidly. The game essentially is about helping him reconnect to all those elements that allow him to make that final gift. So all the gameplay basically revolves around that. And to be honest, the game is based around a friend of mine who's going through a lot of the same stuff right now. He's one of my mentors when I was younger, and he's having a hard time remembering almost anything. I mean, he doesn't have Alzheimer's, maybe early stage Alzheimer's. We're not really sure, but he's definitely going through some serious problems as an artist. He wanted to finish a couple of things before he goes, and he knows that as his mind goes, his body will follow rapidly afterwards, and he's aware of it. And you know, I think that, you know, when you think about that, how scary can that possibly be? You know, and to put somebody into the mind of the person that's going through that is, to me, a very compelling story to tell for any individual. And, you know, I think that this is the thing that we want to show, that, you know, even though, you know that the end is coming, there's always some hope there. And that's your job as a game player, is to kind of give this guy hope and help him finish it.
Turning to your Kickstarter, you've got about, what is it, you're 21 days left, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, 21 days. You've raised 25,000 and about 600 out of the 48,000. What has been something you didn't expect with the Kickstarter campaign, or like what's your thoughts on the whole process and as an indie developer? I don't imagine you've kind of turned to crowdfunding before with most of the other projects you worked on. So what's that feel like? What's kind of your take on the whole? I'd call it a craze these days to turn to crowdfunding.
It's you know, you're pulling your hair out all the time. You know, it's like, oh, we're halfway, you know. But it starts to, there's this sort of ebb and flow that goes with people donating. Somebody, you know, like I think we had a big push early on because a lot of the Mist people saw what we were doing, and a lot of them donated a little bit of money. And now we just released a Linux version of the demo, and that is being picked up by everybody. So we saw another bit of a surge. So it's you know, it's a constant push from a promotion standpoint. I don't think I realized just how much time it takes to actually get involved and keep, you know, contacting people and keep working towards keeping it updated to make it successful. I mean, it's almost a full-time job just by itself doing that.
Sure.
And I spend many hours a day going through emails and you know, looking for points that I can you know, add Twitter, you know, tweet to, and you know, just get the message out, what we're doing, what we're trying to, you know, to help convince people that, you know, give to our project. You know, we're a good project. We got, you know, good ideas. Help us out. So I think that promotional aspect of it, I underestimate how much work that was. And it's a lot. Even though there's a bunch of us on it, I'm still doing the bulk of probably personal emails anyway to everybody I know and anybody I know. You know?
And I mean, you mentioned the demo, which I think is a big reason why I'm predicting success for you guys is in. I can't imagine the stress you guys are going through when I pick up a Kickstarter project that I start following and, talking with the developer and stuff. I get some of that. It's like, oh, are they going to succeed? Is this project I've been following going to succeed? I can't imagine being on the other end of it. But simply having that demo, which, I encourage people to go out and try, it's better than any amount of video or anything like that.
Right.
To get an idea of any of these games. And having that demo available kind of goes a long way to earning people's trust and ultimately their dollars. Kind of rounding back towards a little bit more about you, the thing we like to do most in our interviews with developers is kind of ask two questions. One, to get an idea of who you are as a gamer, and two, to encourage the community. So the first question is, what have you been playing in your surely limited free time, if you have any of that at this point, or in recent time? What other games have you playing other than the ones you've been working on?
Well, let me see. What games have I played recently? I just picked up Doom. I haven't started playing it yet. Looking forward to getting it in and ripping some demon butt off. But that's one side of me. But other games that I've played in the last couple of years that have been very inspiring: the Stanley Parable, Dear Esther. I think Dear Esther, is, well, it's just strictly a very, very meditative walkabout, which is really what it is. But it's got a narration to it that is can bring you to your tears if you really follow it through. It's a very emotional experience playing that game. For as little mechanically as there is going on in Dear Esther, it's an incredible emotional experience. It is, and you're just walking around and you're hearing the story, and and you just get sucked into that story while you're wandering around, and that alone is just, that's worth it. It's an amazingly immersive experience with that one in particular. As I said, the Stanley Parable, which is great because it's just it's got such a sense of humor about it. It doesn't take itself seriously, and I love that about that. Soma was another one. The Talus Principle, which the puzzles, I kind of like the puzzles. I actually like the puzzles in Talus Principle more than I like when I'm playing in Witness. I'm just started playing Witness, and that's a bit frustrating at times so far. But it's a beautiful game all the same. I just got through playing Castle Wolfenstein,
nice.
Latest version of that. I played that through, I think, without sleeping for a day. I just, hurts myself and said, I got to finish this.
Binge it, yeah.
Binge the hell out of it, and it was a blast, So, what other games? Really, as far as that goes, Journey. Games that are kind of similar to what we're doing, just to kind of get a feel for how other people are approaching the genre. I haven't played Everybody's Gone to the Rapture yet, but that's on my queue right now, waiting to be played. There's a few other games. Actually, one little game that I had a lot of fun with, which is really very low-tech art done. Very, very primitively done art-wise, though it's still very immersive, was this little game called Lifeless Planet.
Oh.
And I played that game, and I got really sucked into the story. And, it really wasn't all... The graphics were... if I was an art director, I would say, okay, this is a good white box,
Yeah.
Of the game. But after a while, I didn't really care about the graphics because the story and just the way that these guys laid that game out was just a lot of fun. It was a very simple game, and it took about 5 hours to play it. I think at least took me about 5 or 6 hours to play it. It just tended to be like one of the things that stands out in my mind lately, and it's it goes to show you that you don't have to have the most advanced art team and everything else to do a decent little game. So I guess if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. We just like to get an idea of what, people see indie developers as creating these games, but you're playing games too. We like to find out what's your bread and butter. And kind of finally wrapping things up, we like to have indie developers kind of give a call out to other indie devs that they think are doing something unique. So what's another indie developer that you're kind of following now and you think is doing something that's kind of worthy of giving a shout out?
Let me see. I really haven't been following as much as I'd like to be. Obviously, like the Dear Esther, which has gone kind of mainstream now. It's the people that did Stanley Parable. I'm not really particularly one to follow companies per se.
Sure.
I follow games. What I find that I enjoy, and a lot of the games I've been playing are definitely indie games. Lifeless Planet is about as indie as you're going to get.
Right. Sure.
I don't play pixel-based games. I don't play shooters necessarily that are or that style game all that much, other than some stuff on my phone maybe. I played Monument Valley, which I absolutely love that game. I played The Room for a little bit on my phone. I'm not real big in that kind of a puzzle. It's a very Myst-like puzzle.
Mhm.
But as far as shoutouts, really, there's this other little game that's coming out called Bacon Man.
Yeah, I've run into the
That
team. Was it SkyMap doing Bacon Man? Yeah.
that looks really, really pretty interesting. What's it? Oh God, Perception looks like that's going to be really interesting. That's a little game developer based out of Boston, I think, that's doing that.
Cool.
And that's a very cool one. Trying to think of some other ones that are down there. Oh man, running into a total blank right now. This is, I just got back from PAX, and I think, my brain is still kind of like trying to heal itself.
Oh, I know. After you come out of the big convention season, you're just like, ugh.
Yeah, it's like you look every direction you turn, there's a different game, and after a while, it's just one big gigantic bundle of noise.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us, kind of give a little bit about your background, about the background of Zed. I encourage everybody to check out the Kickstarter for Zed. Give it a look at the details, play the demo. It's going to be the best way you could experience anything. So thank you, Chuck, for taking the time to talk with us.
No problem. One more last game. I think
yeah.
A Flame in the Flood was.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you have seen that one yet.
I have. Yeah, I've played quite a bit of The Flame in the Flood. It's funny, I have that soundtrack just about on repeat sometimes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I don't consider myself really a country or a bluegrass fan, but something about Chuck Reagan's soundtrack just was like about it when that game first came out, and anytime I'm kind of in a relaxed mood, that's on. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that game too. So
yeah, that's a good one. So
yeah.
But anyway, hey, thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Please keep us in the loop, and we'll be watching and well wishing for Zed as the Kickstarter continues.